Hello, it's me again. I want to spend some time now talking about agoraphobia. Now, this is something that I've had personal experience of, and I guess it dates back to when I was about 12. It was probably my earliest experience of it. Now, agoraphobia covers a whole range of things, and in fact, it's difficult to find the dividing line between agoraphobia and other issues such as social phobia and such, OCD, obsessions and so on. I tend not to like labels because I think if you label yourself with something it tends to seem more important. But anyway, agoraphobia itself literally means fear of open places, or fear of the marketplace, is its literal translation. And it covers basically people who are afraid of being in situations outside of their home, social situations, or any number of different situations they might find too much to be able to do. And it all stems from the fact that it's not so much the place or the experience that they're afraid of, it's the way that they feel in themselves. That is what causes them to not want to do this. Now, I've talked a lot about Claire Weeks in my previous recordings, and she, to my knowledge, she was the first medical doctor to write a book about agoraphobia and its treatment, and it was called Peace from Nervous Suffering, and it was published in 1971, and I have somewhere one of the earliest editions of that book, and it's a truly groundbreaking book. In fact, it was the second book she wrote. But she continues with her 4 concepts for recovery, and she applies them specifically to agoraphobia and people suffering from that. Now, I mentioned that I first experienced agoraphobia when I was about 12, and it came about in a, well, not that remarkable a way. Up until about that age, I was a happy, healthy, outgoing kid, quite bright for my age. I went to school at a small rural primary school. I did pretty well. I was confident. I was always very inquisitive and loved to learn things and ask questions, and basically I was pretty happy. But then I left that school when I was 11 and went on to a grammar school, which was a whole new ball game, and compared to what I'd been used to at my first school, this was totally different. It was well, for a start, the teaching itself was boring, terribly boring. We used to just sit around and teachers used to spout on their various subjects, and there was no interaction. We were all kind of chained to our desks, and that in itself kind of put me off just in the first year I was there. But quite apart from that, I pretty soon realised there was a lot of people at this school who were a lot cleverer than I was, which, given my previous small school background, was a bit of a shock. But however, I did my best, and through the first year I more or less coped. Now, at the end of the first year, we had a school sports day, and I was a fair runner in those days, and they selected me to take part in a relay race, 4 by 100 yards, whatever it was. And part of that involved going along to training sessions in the evening. This is something I still I don't know why I didn't do it, but I just couldn't face the idea of having to spend time at this school in my own time, so I never went. Anyway, the day came and there was the race, and I think, yes, I was the 3rd runner in this race, and I ran pretty well, I think, but when it came to the final handoff of the baton to this fourth runner, I made a complete mess of it and nearly dropped it because I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I'd never done a relay race before. And as a result, this boy, who was a bit of a big head, a bit of a Jack the Lad type who thought he was good at everything, he was the one who was going to take the baton, and he came last. Now, at that tender age, there was a certain amount of humiliation involved here because I'd made a mess of it, and like I said, I was a fair runner, and I thought it would have been all right. But that began a campaign of bullying and victimisation against me, led by this boy whom I'd fumbled the hand over to. And it was right at the end of the term, but I thought, well, school holidays in between, it's all going to get forgotten. But no, it wasn't. And when I got back to start the second year of the school, this boy made it his business to torment me with my failure to do the right thing in this race. Stupid race. That's all it was, just a sports day race. And things kind of went downhill from then on. I didn't know how to handle. I never encountered somebody like this before. I didn't know how to handle this boy. And in common with a lot of bullies, he had his little entourage of hangers-on who were more scared of him than I was probably, and they used to join in. And anyway, eventually it reached a point where I just wouldn't go to school. I refused point blank to go to school, and this used to cause any amount of problems with my mum and dad. And this went on for several weeks, quite a few weeks in fact. But that was the point at which fear had prevented me from leaving the house. So in that sense, it could be described as my first experience of agoraphobia, because I was so acutely aware of what this boy was going to do to me whenever I went to school, and it was just I felt powerless, although I felt very vulnerable at that age anyway. We all remember what it was like to be an early teenager. And I couldn't bring myself to talk about it with anyone either. I just, it did eventually come out, but for all the good it did. But that, like I said, was when I first refused to do something because I was too frightened to do it. I mean, my early years, I'd been fearless. I used to do stupid things, all sorts of things that kids get up to when they're young. So from that point on, I mean, I did eventually get back to school. But the difference was, there was a very big difference in how I approached school. This boy seemed to be ubiquitous. He was always around when I didn't want him to be around. And from then on, I kind of submerged my happy, outgoing, inquisitive self into this very shy, very closed up little boy who wouldn't say boo to a goose. I buried a part of myself. The real me, the real boy that I'd been, got buried from that point on, and the rest of my school years, right up until I was 16, were utterly miserable, and I couldn't wait to leave. I mean, it did let up. It wasn't like it for the whole of the time. It just used to come in phases, depending on bullies that are like that. They tend to, pick their targets and see how much reaction they get and so on. But anyway, that's how it all began. And even at that point, when I left school, I went to work, and I talked about my my late teen years and my other recordings. But I was always extraordinarily shy, very shy, and all sorts of stupid things I'd do. Like, for example, when I was working, part of my job involving having to phone people, and I was so nervous and self-conscious. I used to wait till lunchtime, till all the other people had gone out of the office, and I used to go over to the window and stand there because I when I used to try and talk to people on the phone, I used to stammer. My neck used to go shake like this. And I was so self-conscious, I couldn't bear the thought of people seeing me like this. So, that's a social phobia of a kind, isn't it? So, anyway. But that was the nature of it. So, after early years, I did gain a lot in confidence doing that job, and things were very different working with adults. No more bullies. They're all nice people I work with, and so. But it was, I suppose, in a sense, from that point on, I was always agoraphobic to a degree, because there were so many things I wouldn't do because I was too frightened to do. I was never a socializer of any kind. I would never go out anywhere unless I had to. Very lonely, very keeping myself to myself. And then I had my nervous illness when I was 18, and things changed a bit after that. But basically inside I was still the same. I was still used to avoid any social situations. I used to avoid certain things I felt I couldn't do. And this followed me all through my life. In my 20s I got married. I'd overcome things enough to go through all that. I had a wonderful wedding, beautiful wedding, and I was happier than I'd ever been in my life, because I had such a wonderful wife, and everything was so different. And the shy little boy had grown up quite a bit by that time. Now, I talked about my last 11 years recent experience of nervous illness and panic attacks and anxiety. And the last couple of weeks, I've been reminded of just what agoraphobia entails and what it feels like. I had, a couple of weeks ago, I picked up a nasty summer virus. It was more like flu, which is something I've never had, ever, in July. And it really hit me hard. I felt really, really lousy. This is on top of just the normal anxiety stuff anyway. But it dragged me down for at least a good part of it. I got a whole week and I couldn't sleep for it. It was 4 or 5 nights at all. And it's made me aware just how much I still liked to avoid leaving the house. And I've talked extensively about my balance problems and all the previous symptoms that have stopped me from doing things. But in recent times, the balance has been the biggest issue. Now, there have been times where I've been able to handle it better than others, but there's also been many more times where I've just taken the path of least resistance and stayed at home, because the prospect of having to go out with this awful, unbalanced, dizzy, strange feeling just seemed too much. I just couldn't face it. And this is the problem with people who suffer from agoraphobia. It's the thought of having to deal with whatever it is they're frightened of, be it panic attacks, be it some other symptom or some other feeling within themselves, or embarrassment or blushing, or so anything of that kind, something that makes them very conscious of themselves or is likely to embarrass them or humiliate them. It's not where they're going or what they're doing, it's how they feel and how they react in themselves. That is the root of the problem with agoraphobia. And so it is with me. That's how it's been with me. I thought, I don't want to go out with this dizziness. What if I fall over? What if I collapse? Blah, blah, blah. All this stuff. Same old stuff that I've worried about so long. And before that, it was something else. I mentioned my fear of vomiting. What if I vomited when I was out? All these things. Everybody who finds it difficult to leave their house has got something like that, which they're deadly scared of will happen when they're out. And I think it's fair to say that panic is probably the biggest reason out of all the reasons there can be. Now, over time, I've learned to, by practicing the method I learned first through Dr. Weeks, and then I built upon with David Johnson and his Freedom from Fear program. Through that, I've managed to get myself, well, I'm not saying I'm cured of it, I'm far from cured. I mean, there's many things I would still now avoid because, of how I might feel. But over the last couple of weeks when I've been ill, I realised, how easy it is to slip into that situation where, especially if you don't have to, where you don't leave the house, where the prospect of leaving the house seems just too frightening to be contemplated. And this is why Dr. Weeks' wonderful book explains it all so well, because she had so much experience of it. Excuse me a minute. Sorry about that. It's still lingering on. However, but as I say, through the years I've trained myself, if you like, to use the principles I'd learned and to put myself into situations which I would have previously avoided. Now, there are still, like I say, so many things I won't do or wouldn't do, but by practicing those techniques, the facing, accepting, floating, letting time pass, I managed to get myself more mobile and done more things than I thought I could otherwise do. And this is something you have to start somewhere. It depends where you are in this condition. I mean, agoraphobia can mean so many different things. For example, there are people who literally are housebound. They won't leave the house. Or there are people that will go and do a limited set of things, like go to work and back each day. But if they have to broaden their horizons any further, they're very reluctant to do so because of the way they think they will feel when they have to try and do these things. So like it covers a huge range of different sort of levels, if you like, of suffering from agoraphobia. But the approach is still the same. Obviously, for someone who's housebound, it's going to be that much harder to get them sort of outside of that front door. And this is why Claire Weeks' book is so good, because she talks people through the stages of, there's lots of different approaches to agoraphobia. I'm not saying agoraphobia, that's not the only one, obviously. But in my experience, certainly, it's the one that works. And as with panic, the only way is through it, is to actually do it. Now, when I had my stroke last year, I had to gain confidence in just simply walking about outside again. Now, I was lucky I had my lovely wife to help me. She was with me every time. And it took me quite some time to find the courage to do it on my own. It was just the thought of what might happen to me while I was out. I might just fall over, or, any number of things could have happened. But it was basically the same approach as dealing with agoraphobia. It was a practice. Now, what would you do? Supposing you're in that situation now, you're too frightened to leave your home because you fear what might happen, and if you listed the possibilities, there'd be any number of different reasons. But I wouldn't mind betting, probably many of you, it'll be just having a panic attack. What do you do? Well, if you've watched my previous videos, you know the approach I've taken, and the approach that Claire Weeks suggested, and that is you have to go through them. There's no good running away, you have to go through them. Now, obviously, you can't do this necessarily in one foul swoop. You can't just walk out the door and say, oh yes, I'm going to have a panic attack, great, and just, walk around the block and back home. It's not that simple. Well, it can be that simple, but it's for most people it's not. So the steps that Claire Weeks describes in her book is to do it gradually. You know, take each step one step at a time, and then gradually increase what you can do. And she does it very sensibly. She gauges the speed at which people tend to recover. I mean, she wrote a series of journals for people suffering in this way, quarterly journals, and each one she used to try and coincide with where she thought the person was in their recovery. But everybody is different, so where do you start? It's opening that front door and walking out into the daylight, and especially if you've been entombed, so to speak, in your house for months, maybe years. Where the hell do you start? Well, this is what I did when I had my stroke. I just walked around the block, basically. My wife came with me. I just walked around the block, and yes, I was scared. Of course I was scared, but I felt a lot safer because she was with me. But I knew that it was the only way I could overcome it. And that gradually developed over a period of time. I used to keep the walks going, I used to go a bit further each time. And I mean, that is the approach. You start off with just a small effort. But this is where some people differ in how they suggest people react to the way they feel. Some therapies suggest that you walk as far as you can without panicking or without having your symptoms, and then go back home. If you get the symptoms or whatever it is, turn around and go back home. Now, I think that might be helpful for some people. Personally, I don't think it's a very progressive approach. It's inevitable. If you've stayed at home, if you've been restricted by your fear of panic or whatever you feel, if you've been restricted in that way, it's inevitable that as soon as you face going out, as soon as you start to do it, you actually do go out, then you're going to get the symptoms. How could you not? It's no good trying to pretend that they're not happening or trying to forget them. It just doesn't work. Now, let me give you an example from my own recent experience. Now, where this dizziness stuff with me has become so bad, every time I've gone out, every single time I've gone out, as soon as I get my shoes on and I get my car keys, the dizziness gets 10 times worse. It starts by when I try and move my head, my eyes don't kind of follow, so everything is destabilized around me. And it's automatic. Every time, just the thought of leaving the house. Now, that's one thing. Now, when I open the front door, step outside into the dazzling bright daylight, that's another thing. I mean, my eyes are super sensitive to light anyway, ever since I had this stroke. But I mean, for anybody, if they've been in a house inside and not out into the sunshine for a long period, the light is going to affect you, whatever happens. So I mean, that's just something that you adapt to at the time. But so every time I've been going out, that's been happening to me, and every time the same thoughts go through my mind. What's going to happen now? Oh my goodness, what's going to happen now? So all I've done is just to keep on practicing, not trying to avoid the way I feel, not trying to forget it, because I can't. It's impossible to forget the way you're feeling. And just go and do what it is I was going to do with it all happening. And when you do that and you practice it enough times, and you realize that all the fears that you had about what might happen to you when you go out, you realize that it's all just nonsense. Just your mind telling you stupid stories. They're just your imagination telling you all sorts of impossible situations might happen, which don't happen. Excuse me a minute, time for another cough. Sorry. Anyway, So that has been my recent experience of it. And there's no one set of rules that cover everybody apart from those 4 basic concepts I talked about. Those 4 concepts, if you understand them properly and appreciate what they really mean, they will cure you. And agoraphobia is just, Claire Weeks used to call it just another phase in an anxiety state, and she's right, she was right. It doesn't, it's not something apart from it, it's all bound up in it, because if you, whatever started your anxiety state or started your panic attack, it's inevitable really that you're going to feel reluctant to leave home, aren't you? Or do anything outside your normal range of activities. So the concepts she described in her first book, she again applied them again to agoraphobia in her second book, and I do recommend that you read that book, Peace from Nervous Suffering. It's in a combined edition with another of her books. The book itself is called Essential Help for Your Nerves, and there's 2 of her books in there, as I say, but that gives you everything you need to know to get yourself moving. Now, you'll probably think, well, it's all well and good. It's easy for him to say that. My situation is so-and-so. My situation is much more complicated. I feel like this, I feel like that. I know I could be talking to any number of people with any number of different conditions and circumstances. And, I'm not belittling this in any way, because I know how hellish it can be. I really know. Because there's been so many times when I just gone out and wished the ground would just swallow me up, and I wish I didn't have to do this. I wish I could just be like anyone else, walking around and just take it for granted like they all appear to. And I thought, why? And I've thought so many times, I thought, why do I have to have all this stuff when I go out? I'm just walking outside. I'm just doing ordinary things. This is something else that goes through your mind when you're suffering this way. You think, why can't I just be like everybody else? What have I done wrong? It's causing me to be tormented by this thing. But when you begin to understand what's causing it, and you begin to see how much of it you're doing to yourself by your approach to the way you feel, once you really understand that, then you can do things with a totally different attitude. You have to practice it. Yes, it's not easy. No, it's not easy. But you can do it. Anyone can do it. Anyone. Wherever you happen to find yourself. Now, so I want to say again, just to emphasize these 4 principles that are based, that Claire Weeks used to teach people how to deal with agoraphobia. First, face what it is you're feeling. You can describe it to yourself. Face it, and don't shy away from it. Don't try and forget it. Don't run away from it. Don't shrink from it. Face it full on. What are you feeling like? What is happening? Face it. Then, having faced it, accept that it is there for the moment, and it'll be there for some time yet, because your nervous system is still very sensitized. And I talked a lot about sensitization in my other recordings. Now, the third principle is floating. Instead of offering all your tense resistance, tensing up your whole body like an overwhelming spring, just do the opposite. Let the feelings be there. Let slump, sag. There's all sorts of words you can use for it. Float is a good word because it kind of releases the tension. And letting time pass means that it takes time for you to adopt this approach, to practice it and to get it right, just as it took time for you to get into an anxiety state in the first place. So those are the principles again. Letting time pass is the last one, and it means give as much time as you need to doing it. There is one other thing I should mention. Both Claire Weeks and David Johnson have done recordings specifically to help people when they're out and about to actually, keep moving, keep going. And I would strongly recommend that you seek those out, because it's like having somebody with you, reassuring you the whole time. So it's something you could take with you. Have somebody encouraging you as you go. So agoraphobia is nothing so very different. It's just, like I say, part of an anxiety state. But for some people, yes, obviously it's worse than others. But in the same way as panic attacks can be overcome, you can go through the panic attacks. You can deal with whatever it is that's preventing you from moving freely, be it panic attacks or something else. Like with me, with my balance. Whatever it is, you can still go and do things. You can still pass through this barrier of fear that's preventing you from moving and going where you want to go. By passing through it, that is the key to it all. Going through, not running away from it, not trying to avoid it. And you gain so much confidence once you begin to practice doing things. You gain so much confidence because you succeed, and yes, all right, so what if you feel the symptoms? It doesn't matter that you do. It's good that you do, because the more experience you have of feeling the feelings and knowing that you still did things even with those feelings there, the more you do that, the more confidence you get in this approach, because you think, all right, so I had a panic attack, but I still finished what I was doing. They didn't kill me. They didn't cut me out of hospital. I'm still here. And you begin to see these things in proportion, and you begin to lose your fear of them. So, let's say agoraphobia has been quite a big part of my life, but it's something that time takes you through. The more you practice the method I've talked about, then you begin to broaden your horizons and start to do things you never thought you'd be able to do. And that's really what it's all about. It's not having your life restricted by fear anymore. I mean, it's fair to say that everybody's life is restricted by some fear or another. Everybody has a kind of, a zone which they won't, their comfort zone which they won't go beyond because of fear of what might happen. But it's a different story with nervous illness, and it's a different story with panic attacks and agoraphobia. Which, as a last thing I'd like to sort of mention again, is because it's very important that people understand this. Sensitization is such an important part in, not just for the sufferer to understand, but for people, the sufferer's family or friends. It's because of the exaggeration and the intensity and the frequency with which all these feelings come, caused by this sensitized reaction. Your nerves are in a sensitized state. They exaggerate and make everything seem worse, and make all the fearful thoughts you have seem worse. It is that which is the key factor. And by practicing these methods, going out and doing what you can, you begin to desensitize, because the feelings start to calm down as you lose your fear of them. Anyway, there's so much more I can talk about, because I've had, over the years, had so many different things, and I hope these talks are helping you out there. This is what I'm doing now. I want to be to help people, because I've had such a lifetime of it. So many different things, and I feel particularly sorry for the younger people amongst you, because you probably feel so confused by it all. And you're living in an era where it's supposed to be medication is the answer for everything, but the method I talk about might seem a little bit too harsh, or might just seem even old-fashioned, but it's not. I mean, it works. And so I ramble on a bit when I'm talking about this, I know I do, but I'd like just really to say, all these talks are aimed at helping you to understand what's happening to you and why you feel like you do and what you can do about it. And that's why I'm going to do. I should do more of these, as I might even keep it on a sort of a regular basis, just a kind of progress report or whatever. But anything, I'm always happy to take requests, if you like, if people want me to talk about particular things or particular fears or phobias, or if I can comment on them, I will. I mean, if anyone wants to ask me anything about these, anything I say in these talks, please do. I'm very happy to help. So, I think that's my rambling way. That's basically what I wanted to say about agoraphobia. And I'll catch you on the next recording, which hopefully will be soon. Thanks for watching. Bye.